And we are live. Welcome back. This is episode number 38 of Calibrated with Scott. I'm Scott, of course. Today I'm joined by the one and only Alex. How are you?
Hello, my friend. Thank you for having me on again, as always. Hello, Bot. Hello, dear listeners. I'm sure we have plenty to discuss today, and I think it'll be a very interesting episode indeed.
Yeah, definitely. And he kind of ruined it for me, but our other guest is Kremlin sponsor Bot. Bot, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing sad because, Alex, spoiled it, but
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
he
good.
he does that from time to time. It's Big Sag, but it's all good.
Spoiler alerts, Alex. God.
I'm pretty sure you guys' names are on the title of the YouTube videos, so everybody will know before they even hear the intro. But
That's
that's
true.
besides the point. Alex messed it up, and we're gonna shame him for it. We got to just get right into it because I haven't done a podcast in about 5 days, and there's been a lot going on. I want to start with Berdyansk, the Belgorod invasion by the Ukrainians. The last time I talked about it, it was unresolved, and now it is resolved, and it resolved exactly how we thought it would. The Ukrainians went in, took some pictures, lost some guys, lost some equipment, and left. The whole thing seems like it was either some half-assed attempt to get the Russians to relocate or just a PR campaign. I would like to hear your guys' thoughts. What was give me some of the the juicy details. What was the funniest aspect of this whole thing? Because it was, in my book, pretty pathetic.
I mean, I think the funniest part was that they tried it at all. I mean, they sent like what 100 guys. I think is the biggest estimate I've seen. They sent 100 guys in some Humvees and some AMRABs across the border. Most of the guys that you're seeing the pictures and videos that are being interviewed, quote unquote, those guys just stayed there for like 10 minutes. They shot some videos, they did some TikToks, and then they just fucked right off and just ran right back across the border and left all those other guys there who just got obliterated over the course of a day and then eventually finally ran away themselves. It was just laughable.
I think for me, the absolute best part were the videos that came afterwards, where you see one of their Humvees explode effectively the moment it crosses the border. So it's not like they were unexpected or anything. They were absolutely massacred the moment they were in. So you know that on all of those photos where they're so, brave in front of street signs and shit, every single one of them is bricking it.
Yeah, the we saw a video of Su-24s, I think, or Su-27s. I can't remember. It was kind of hard to tell what the aircraft was, but they were coming in and doing bombing runs on on these guys that were just across the border. So it definitely was not a fun time. I also saw a video where they were rolling in and an artillery shell hit like 20 meters behind them, and they all dismount pretty quick. It was
That's the one
just,
I'm on, Scott.
yeah.
That's the one I'm on about. It's not nothing. I'm pretty sure it hits the last vehicle.
Oh, is that it? Does it actually hit something?
I'm pretty sure it
I
just
just thought he turned
do you
around
know
because he was
the
scared.
the big hole that two vehicles are sunk into? I reckon it hit one of them and the second one drove in.
I mean that could definitely be true. Because we did see two vehicles that looked, I mean, rather undamaged considering, and they were in a pretty deep hole that was made by probably an artillery shell, or a small bomb. Um,
And one of the other funny things that came out of that was the U.S. statement that we have no evidence right now to support the rumors that there is American equipment being used in this raid. And then there's pictures of Humvees and AMRAPs.
I know, it's just
it's
littering
like,
the place.
it's like okay, that's not proof.
Yeah, no, it was a complete fiasco. I think it makes the AFU look foolish. They they tried to distract from what was going on in Bakhmut, and they just couldn't put anything significant together. They have continued striking Belgorod since then. They've been striking actually all over the front. I think that they are trying to create some chaos in the rear. They're looks like they're lining up and staging for this upcoming offensive if it happens. But this whole Belgorod thing was just a complete joke. I
Well,
just,
I mean,
yeah,
to, to be fair, their goal was to get people to stop talking about Bakhmut in the Western media, and they did.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, it did work. The bad downside to it is that it was over so quickly and it got thrashed so thoroughly that most of those early statements about, oh my God, it's an invasion and Ukraine is invading Russia and all of that, most of that kind of went away really quick and turned into what the hell was that? But they at least they were focusing on the Western media was focusing on the ineptitude of the AFU's little foray into Belgorod and stopped talking about them getting their asses kicked in Bakhmut. So, from that perspective, it did change the narrative a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely distracted from what was happening in Bakhmut, but I don't think the outcome was very much, very much more beneficial for the Ukrainians. I mean,
No, it made them look incompetent.
Yeah, and then the MOD gets up and they just post bodies. And if you want to talk about how it is specifically a propaganda operation, just look at what happened when they came back across the border. There were, guys from the two separate units who are claimed to be Russian partisans. They're all speaking English, and there were like 100 fucking reporters standing around. I mean, it's just it's bonkers that's happening. Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
I found this thing most interestingly to perhaps be a dry run of the informational warfare that we'll see unleashed accompanying the Ukrainian offensive, a topic I'm sure we'll touch on later. But the sort of the news that people kept receiving from insiders, etc., etc. Oh, there's tanks here, they've broken through here, there's more of them, and more and more and more, etc. It turned out there was only like a couple hundred of them, and they had, half a dozen to a dozen lightly armored vehicles. So perhaps this, I'm afraid, in fact, that this has confirmed to them that they can sow panic by simply having channels that pretend to be pro-Russian, and then every once in a while, when the sort of the command comes in, they'll send out this one particular bit of false reporting, and then the whole thing comes crashing down.
Yeah, it's I've actually moved away from paying attention to a lot of the bigger pro-Russian telegrams because there's very few that don't. I mean, they're quick to doom and they post a lot of information that turns out to be incorrect in the long term.
Well, I mean, just think about the whole Bakhmut quote unquote counter offensive on the flanks. I mean, we were being told by major channels that they're running and the flanks are collapsing and they're crumbling and this is the fault of General Lapin, who poor Lapin. I mean, that guy gets it's blamed for everything. And what did it turn out to be? Nothing. And same thing here. Everyone was talking about how it's a map. I mean, the way people were talking, you would have thought it was several armored battalions that were going into Belgorod, not just like 100 guys on a LARP.
Yeah, you'd think that the administrative buildings were falling. You think that the Russians were in full retreat. It was the most overblown nonsense. And the whole pro-Ukrainian information space bid on it instantly. It wrote it as long as they could, and now they have just forgotten it. It's bewildering to me how that information space tends to have the shortest termed memory about their own losses and their mistakes. They just seem to completely ignore anything that goes bad for them and only focus on the good, more propaganda-esque aspects of their campaign. And it's just very odd to me because the pro-Russian side never forgets their mistakes. They, curse their mistakes and they will do everything that they can to prevent them in the future, it seems like. But the Ukrainians just pretend like it never happened. It's very interesting. I think that can be seen with the recent events around the Ivan Horsk, however you say it. In the Black Sea, there was the claims that the drones had destroyed the ship, sunk the ship, done severe damage to the ship. Everybody was making these long threads about how the ship had sunk at sea, and how there was like the Forte 10 aircraft or drone out flying around over the Black Sea oddly. and everybody was making this correlation that it was out there watching the ship sink, and it was just all nonsense. Ships back in port, perfectly fine. The Russians posted videos saying that they had destroyed the vessels and that no damage was caused, and that's turned out to be the truth. And they just completely forgot about it. If the ship would have sunk, they would have been singing songs about it right now. But since it didn't sink, their whole cope escapade is just completely forgotten. Do you guys notice this? Because it pains me sometimes when I'm talking to people and they just completely ignore all context.
Well, they started making memes. I mean, bear in mind, even the most hopeful of the Ukrainian Twitters didn't say that it was sunk. They were only claiming that they damaged it. And I guess some people said it was severely damaged. But they weren't even claiming they'd sunk it. And they were making memes and acting like they'd won a great victory. I mean, bear in mind, it is just a recon ship. It's got like 2 Iglas on it and a few machine guns. It's not what you would call a massive warship. But even that, even if they had sunk it, it's an intel ship. Who cares? And yet, yeah, they were making memes, they were changing their banners, and it's just pathetic. And then it turns out that it didn't even get hit. That the paints that they didn't even manage to scuff the paint on the damn thing, and all of a sudden, they just don't care. It's like, but this is wrong.
Yeah, that this is a failure, right? And then it's some other cope. They'll bring up something from 9 months ago. What about Kharkov? What about Kherson? What about Kiev? Like, just nonsense. It's like, what are you guys talking about?
I mean, they're still bringing up the
matter.
Moskva, and that's over a year ago. And clearly, what did that help?
Yeah, literally changed nothing. It's
like
just
you sunk a Slava class cruiser. Good for you. What did that accomplish? You didn't kill many of the crew. I think only like 20 people were lost. The rest got off.
Yeah.
And you still don't have a navy, so what did that help you?
Yeah, it's not like you're securing the Black Sea, but it's not even the point. The point is that was a year ago.
Yeah.
The battle has, I mean, that would be like the Germans talking about, oh, look how good we did in France while getting their asses handed to them in the East. It just doesn't make sense. But we took Poland. Yeah, but now you're losing Poland, so it doesn't really matter. And this kind of brings me to like the Bakhmut topic, and I'll throw up a map of what I'm talking about here. According to Syriac maps, the Russians have now regained multiple positions on their flanks, which is important for the continuation of operations around Krasnoy, Ivanivsky, and Kromove, and up along the 0504 and 0506 highways along the in between Bakhmut and Chasiv Yar. So that offensive that cost the Ukrainians probably around 2,000 guys. The Azov battalions were involved. We saw obituaries from those fanatic soldiers. Those are not easy guys to replace, and they do what they're told, which is very important when it comes to military affairs. And those guys are gone now, and for what? A small deblocking of Bakhmut that could have been prevented by pulling out in February. It's just it again, ignoring the things that are going wrong with you while paying attention to, or exaggerating things that basically aren't even going right. All of this screams desperation. Trying to sink a ship, an intel ship at sea, pushing into Belgorod for 12 hours to get murked and then head back, pushing out on the flanks of Bakhmut, but not achieving anything. It looks like nothing is going right for the Ukrainians in this area. Even around Bilohorivka in the north, around Seversk, there's progress. There's progress around Avdiivka. The dam just got taken out, which is actually very interesting. I wanted to hear your guys' opinions on where do you think the Russians go next? Obviously, they're probably going to wait to see if the Ukrainians go on the offensive, bog that down, slow it down, stop it, and then once that occurs, they can, begin an offensive operation somewhere else. Do you think that that's going to be Avdiivka? Do you think that's why they took out that dam around Prvomysky?
I think it's for sure going to be Avdiivka. And to be honest, I'm not sure they're going to wait for the Ukrainians to launch a counterattack either. I mean, it's not like they're going to do a big arrow thing. I think we've seen by now Russia's just going to grind away. They have no problem with a battle taking 6 months, just as long as they win it and as long as their casualties are smaller than the enemies. I mean, I think they'll just keep grinding away no matter what the Ukrainians do, and I'm pretty positive it'll be Avdiivka is the next big thing.
Alex, do you think it's going to be Avdiivka?
I agree, actually. I mean, the target is already semi-enveloped. There's a semicircle there. The force multiplication is fine. There's supply routes for any attacking groups. It's sort of quite central. It's important in terms of morale. Removing the pressure off Donetsk, letting people, breathe for once in their lives would be nice. And inherently, Avdiivka has and always perhaps will be the single toughest nut to crack there. It's further away from their friendly air cover, so it's a little easier to bomb than other cities would. But Avdiivka will perhaps be one of the toughest battles of this conflict.
See, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, because I think that Bakhmut and potentially the upcoming offensive will be the highest intensity and most drawn out battles that we're going to see, because the Ukrainians, if they go on the offensive now, they're going to go for it and they're going to give everything they have, and it's going to be brutal to watch. I don't think, and I mean, unless the Ukrainians don't go on the offensive, then they might be able to commit a lot to Avdiivka and hold it for a long time. But if you just look at a map, Avdiivka does not have the mines, the salt mines that Soledar and Bakhmut had, protecting it. Avdiivka does not have a Soledar that's protecting it, and it does not have a Chasiv Yar to the rear, like directly behind it on a high ground that makes it much easier to defend like Bakhmut was, So I think that Avdiivka is going to be a lot harder to defend, and I'm pretty sure that's why they hit that dam, was to flood down to the south and cut off the supply to Prvomysky, take that flank, and then start moving up north towards Avdiivka.
Well, the thing is that it's not that it's. I mean, number one, it's on high ground. Number two, you're talking about a city that the Ukrainians have been fortifying for 8 years. I mean, there's 8 years of just basically all of Avdiivka is made up of concrete and reinforced steel bunkers at this point. They've spent 8 years fortifying that place to resist an attack. So that's one of the reasons why I think you haven't seen Russia trying to push into the city itself and focusing more on encircling, because I think their plan is to encircle and just starve them out, because I don't believe the MOD wants to send assault troops into what is essentially just a giant fortified steel bunker. It's the same as Papasnaya was. When that town had been fortified for 8 years, and we saw how long it took. I mean, it took a prolonged combined effort after months from not only Wagner, but Chechens and regular Russian military and DPR and LPR militias. It took a lot to take that town, and Papasnaya wasn't as fortified as Avdiivka was. So I mean, it's not that it's there's no Solidar, there's no salt mines, but what there are is 8 years worth of concrete and steel built up into that town to defend it. So it's going to be incredibly difficult to take it, which is why I think the MOD's plan is just to surround it and starve it out. I mean, let them go without food and water for a few weeks and hope they surrender it. If not, basically turn it into one giant Azovstal.
Yeah, and I fully agree. I mean, there's no point in frontally assaulting it. But I don't think that it has the supply, security that Bakhmut had. Even when the Russians were all the way around the flanks, the Ukrainians still had high ground on both sides. Ivanivsky protecting the more, I guess the muddy roads were still protected, even if the 0504 on the to the south was out. The 0506 was only out for short periods of time here and there. That was like the road of death. That was where a lot of guys were dying and vehicles were being lost and stuff. But even now, like the Ukrainians never would really withdrew from the city. They were able to continuously supply and keep their guys going. I just don't see that happening around Avdiivka. We've seen that was the first place where Russian aviation began to be utilized more, greatly before everywhere else. It's where we were seeing the first glide bombs being used, and now I mean, you guys are talking about fortifications, but I think the city has been pretty worked over, and I just don't think it's gonna have the capabilities that Bakhmut had. I don't see it happening in the same exact way.
Well,
Um,
the thing to also consider is we don't know what kind of fortifications the Ukrainians have built. I mean, a large amount of those fortifications could be underground bunkers, which could explain why there's been so many glide bombs dropped on it. But I mean, we don't know how many supplies they stockpiled there over the years and how many bunkers and underground passages they've built. I mean, it's just it's a place the Ukrainians have known they're going to have to defend for 8 years.
yeah,
So I mean,
yeah, I fully agree with you. I mean, it makes perfect sense what you're saying. I'm starting to watching what's going on. I don't think that the Ukrainians are going to have the resources, especially if the Russians are able to push, say, there, maybe around Ugledar and possibly around Seversk.
yeah,
If the
yeah,
Russians are
yeah.
pushing in multiple areas, the Ukrainians are going to have to pick one place to weaken. And I think they'll probably weaken the strongest place, which would be Avdiivka.
Well,
So
I would say I think they probably do have the supplies and the fortifications to hold there. What I don't know if they have is if they have the manpower, because it's easy for them to hold inside the city, inside the fortifications. It's not easy to hold behind the city where the Russians are trying to encircle them, which I don't think they have enough troops to keep the city from being surrounded. And if it's surrounded, well, at that point, it just becomes Azovstal, I guess Azovstal 3.0 at this point, because those supplies are going to dwindle really fast if you have a whole garrison stuck inside there and no way to get any supply at all. So I
yeah,
mean, I think the key factor here is they, like you said, they don't have the manpower to defend it.
yeah. The I think we're about to see the pitiful climax of this SMO for the Ukrainians. I think that they're going to go with everything. And are we in agreement that we think it's going to be in the Zaporozhye direction now? I mean, Bakhmut is a no-go, that they've pretty much shown that has been given up on. And I mean, they can go into Belgorod or something like that, but it's just short Russian supply lines and easily reinforced areas. So I just don't. I think that they're confined to this specific area. The Russians know it. They're not going to move away from it, and the Ukrainians are just going to run headfirst into those defenses. Is that what you guys think? I've been scouring this map looking for a better option for a while now, and I haven't been able to find one. And I'm curious as to what you guys think.
I don't even think it's going to happen.
Yeah, yeah, that is right. That's KSB's stance. He still doesn't think it's ever going to
I
happen.
think we'll see individual little, maybe battalion and brigade sized attempts, but in terms, if we're talking like a big arrow offensive, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't see how they can supply it. I don't see how they can mass for it without getting absolutely mauled from the air before they even kick off.
I mean, I think that's what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, I mean, and you get some Russian channels that talk about how the Ukrainians have massed 50,000, 80,000 troops. Okay, how many of those? I mean, I get it. If you look at it on paper, maybe there is that many, but how many of those troops got there, got to a staging area, and have already been killed? It's like how many of
Also,
those 80 to 50,000 troops are still even alive? How many of their tanks are still there? How many of their vehicles aren't burning wrecks? It's really easy to say they're massing this amount of troops if you just look at it on a map with unit icons.
yeah,
It's
and
another thing to get on the ground and see, oh, this unit is supposed to have 30 tanks. It has 10.
Yeah, and it's like another thing to look at is how many of those 50,000 are artillerymen?
Yeah.
How many are logistics? How many are driving trucks? How many are tankers? Because you need a good amount of infantry, and more than half of your guys are going to be dedicated to rear positions. Logistics, security for captured areas. All the things that you need to perform an offensive like this on this scale. So you might have 50,000 guys, but are 20,000 of those frontline troops in brigades? That's 4 brigades. Is that what you're working with? Do you have 30,000? Because that's what, 6 brigades. That's
Yeah.
not a lot. The Russians can match that easily, and the Russians don't have to match it because they're going to be sitting in trenches with ATGMs and artillery and air support. So I think that the West is pressuring the Ukrainians to go on the offensive and make something happen. I think that they're going to, and I think it's going to end poorly.
And I think
Um,
I think a little telling data point here is how many deadlines have we seen for this? Because remember, early on there was talk about a Ukrainian winter offensive. That never happened. Then it was a spring offensive. And how many times during the spring did we get reports from Western media and from Ukrainian media? They'll be ready to launch in a week. They'll be ready to launch within the next 10 days. They'll be ready to launch within the next 3 days. And then there were several times where we actually got dates. Like, oh, May 1st, April 30th, and shit like that. And then it stopped being a spring offensive. Now it's a summer offensive. And now you have people saying they'll be ready to launch within days. Well, they'll be ready to launch within a week. And now there's people talking about, oh, it may be pushed back to autumn.
yeah,
At what
which
point do we get to the point where, oh, it's going to be another winter offensive?
yeah, and doesn't it make you feel like I was arguing with somebody on Twitter about this. It feels like Kursk. The Ukrainians continued to delay their massive offensive in the hopes of better trained units and better equipped units with new weapon systems. It feels like the past repeating itself. The Ukrainians are on the back foot. They have to make something happen. They're gonna go for it, and the Russians are waiting. I mean, just replace Nazis with the AFU, and you're there. It's just, yeah,
No Nazis with Nazis.
Nazis with
Yeah.
Nazis.
For all the talk about Ukraine having all this manpower, I just want to point out that Dmitry Medvedev, who, Alex, maybe you could help me out here. What is his official title now?
He is deputy chair of the Security Council.
Yes.
That is his most official title. He is also the head of the Military Industrial Commission, so he heads Russia's MIC as well.
So I would like to remind everyone that according to Medvedev, who is in a position to know, I believe it is from over the last 2 months, around 110,000 Russian citizens have volunteered to serve in the war in the Russian military. Bear in mind, there are 150,000 mobilized, which, according to President Putin, have not been engaged yet. So if you've got 110,000 who have joined over the last 2 months, how many have joined in the months prior? We're talking about a significant manpower pool that Russia can draw on.
I mean, at least fully replaced.
Yeah.
All the casualties they've taken have been, replaced by new units. So the Russian army is in the exact position that the Russian government wants them to be in. I mean, if you look at they have their mobilized that have not been brought in. They've been replacing their losses pretty effectively, and their equipment doesn't seem to be in any shortage. I mean, we haven't seen tank shortages anywhere. We haven't seen armored vehicle shortages anywhere. We don't see the Russians using a lot of civilian cars close to the front lines. It's just the the calculus is much different now than it was during Kharkov and Kherson, those
I mean,
offensives last
if
year.
anything, we're seeing more and more of the newer models of Russian equipment because before the war, there weren't a whole lot of T90Ms. But now, I mean, hell, we get every month there's videos of new T90Ms being moved to the front.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're producing more of the brand new vehicles, the brand new equipment, the brand new missiles, the aircraft. I mean, before the war, there was only like a dozen Su-57s. Now there's definitely more than a dozen.
Yeah, we just saw the Su-57 factory the other day in it was a propaganda video, but they were definitely working. So, yeah, there has been no slowdown in the industrial capabilities of the Russian military industrial complex. So, uh, the whole, I mean, this is the oldest meme in the book, but Russia's running out of missiles, Russia's running out of tanks. It hasn't been true the whole time, and it's just purely projection.
Any day now, Scott. I
Yeah,
promise it'll kick in.
we're waiting. I'm still waiting. Do we think Zaluzhny's dead? Alex, I haven't heard from you in a minute. Is Zaluzhny dead? Is he alive? What's going on?
I had this discussion with a good friend earlier this morning. They seem to be doing everything in their power to make it as conceivably sus as possible.
Right?
I have a number of options. Option one, actually, let's discuss sort of the options as we go down them. Option one is obviously mind games. Just fuck with us. Just make the weirdest edits of him, change his eye color, remove a shadow in a photo here, just to make the Russian media space, sort of go mad over it.
Yeah.
That's option one. Do we think that's the possible choice?
It could definitely be. I mean, it's
Possibly.
very, very suspect to me that you're posting pictures and videos of him from like May 2022. That's so weird to me. It's almost like incriminating how suspicious it is for the situation,
I
right?
think the weirdest one was the girl who posted the picture of him that people then were able to find out was from like July of last year,
That's the one
and
I'm
then she
talking about.
immediately
Yeah.
deleted it.
Yeah. It's just it's very odd. The video was very weird where they pan to him. He doesn't talk, his face doesn't move, he just waves. It's like, is he autistic or something? Can he not get in front of a camera and say, "Hey guys, guess what? I didn't get hit by a rocket. I'm fine. They suck and their propaganda is shit as well." Like they could say that, but they're not.
People forget that we're in the era of deep fakes. I mean, people people make videos where it seems like Trump and Biden and Obama are playing Modern Warfare together. So I mean, anything's possible.
Yeah, I saw one, I posted one the other day and it was an impressionist and he's just standing in front of the camera and he's switching between Jack Nicholson, George Clooney, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and his face is changing and his hair is different and weird, but you almost can't tell. And if you have a good impressionist, you can fake anything these days. And I mean, that's a little bit of a cope. I'm not saying he's dead. I have no idea whether he's dead or alive, but to put out all of these very, very gray area posts about him that really don't confirm his life at all. They don't have any reason to post him being alive. They don't need to. If he's alive, he's alive. But it does make everybody kind of step back and go, that's weird. I don't trust you anymore because you're not just coming out and acknowledging that he's either alive or dead. It's very weird.
The other thing to me is that they have this big offensive coming up. They could have him give a big speech, have a bunch of people shout Sieg Heil or whatever it is they like to shout to their commanders in Ukraine. I assume it's still Sieg Heil. But, have him give a speech, narrate a video, tour the front, talk to the men. But no, they produce the most inane pictures. I honestly, maybe making people doubt themselves is the purpose of this, in which case they're succeeding.
Yeah. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of is that they're running some sort of psyop where he's perfectly fine and they're just going to release all this information. And then when he shows up, it's going to be like this huge victorious, he wasn't dead. I can't believe you guys actually thought he was dead the whole time thing,
Yeah, but
which
what would it gain? That's what
I,
I don't underget.
I, that's,
It's like,
I don't
are
know.
you doing this for gotcha points
I
on
mean,
Twitter?
but here's the thing.
Or
Here's the
what?
thing. When the Russian generals are claimed to be killed, the Russians don't respond. They don't say anything. It seems very suspicious, right? All you have to do is prove that they're alive. And then 2 months later, we see him walking around just fine. It's like, oh, so he is alive. Cool, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, how
You
many
know,
times have the Ukrainians claimed to have killed Gerasimov?
like a million. They've claimed to kill everybody. They claim Putin is dead. I mean,
It's not Putin, it's his double.
they're all doubles. It's just doubles on top of doubles.
Somehow Putin has returned.
Yeah, I don't. That whole thing is just a joke. But I don't know why they're handling this as oddly as they are. That
It's so
all they
weird.
would have to do is just, I mean, it would be such a big win just to show him, right? Show him with like a newspaper and have him talk and say, I absolutely was not hit by a missile. And then he can turn around and show us his big picture of Stefan Bandera or whatever, you know? Like it's not difficult.
Yeah, I mean, he was so prominent for so long, like being interviewed by Newsweek and New York Times, and I think he even had one with like one major U.S. news network, where it was like a big event where they like streamed an interview with him, and he was doing all these interviews for publications all over the world, and then he just vanished.
Yeah.
And now, rather than have him sit down with like a New York Times reporter or something, he's sitting down with some random dude in Ukraine who, and he doesn't even say anything. He just sits there and just like says 3 words to the camera and waves, and that's it. Oh, and then apparently he christened some gunboat.
Do you think Prigozhin has any insight? Because he came out and said that he was within the range of our guns. We fired on his position, and we don't know his whereabouts or his his condition. So I, I'm curious as to know if that's actually a legitimate rumor, because I would not expect Prigozhin to say things like that as much. I mean, if he was like taunting, I could see that that's something Prigozhin would do. If he was exaggerating like something, I could expect that, but he didn't really say it in any it was like kind of a side topic. He was like, and the leader of the AFU was within the range of our guns, and we may or may not have hit him. We don't know, but that is a legitimate thing. And I was, and that kind of took me back a little bit. I was like, I don't trust this guy at all, so I don't know if this is real, but it's also not like him to say things like that. It's very, it was just odd.
The fact that he was so, we may have done it, we don't know. That leads me to believe that he is actually telling the truth about that, because I think if he was trying to hype people up and get points, I think he would have for sure said, "Oh yeah, we definitely got him." But the fact that he was so unsure of it makes me think, okay, yeah, they knew he was there and they took a shot, but they legit just don't know if it worked or not.
Which I've been kind of pondering this. Does it feel like the SMO has changed to you guys? It feels like we're in a different kind of like tempo right now, where the Russians are hitting everything in the rear. I mean, they're hitting warehouses everywhere, ammunition depots everywhere, air defense systems are going up everywhere. The Ukrainians, it could just be a very target rich environment where there's a lot of movement. Things aren't as OPSEC isn't as strong, and things are just being exposed more with Russian intel and deep strike capabilities and a degrading Ukrainian air defense. But it feels like things have changed. It feels like the Russians are now targeting leadership to some extent. They are they're striking deep on targets that seem, I mean, they went after the Patriot battery with Kinzhals. They may have blown up depleted uranium ammunition. They probably have hit donated Western equipment for the upcoming offensive in some of these locations. We just don't know because we don't get pictures. But to me, it almost feels like SMO2, where the Russians have made up their minds. There's no negotiating going on. There's no talks of that. They're talking about ending the grain deal, which I don't really know why it got extended. I honestly, at this point, it just feels like it's trying to get a win for Erdogan, who, by the way, is probably going to win the Turkish elections. So that's a development happening to the south, and control of the Bosphorus is going to be in the hands of somebody that the Russians can negotiate with. And perhaps that's why the grain deal is going through, is to try to keep the economic situation in Turkey strong and, continue winning geopolitical favor for Erdogan. But who knows? But they're talking about canceling it. So it's I'm curious as to your guys' thoughts. SMO2, yes, no? And after the recent events in Belgorod, do you guys, at this point, I don't see Ukraine existing as a state after this. I mean, Ukraine might exist as a state in name, but the government will be completely different. The whole structure is going to be removed and gutted. I'm curious as to your guys' thoughts on that.
I think that I think the Russians are just taking the gloves off and just, I think the Ukrainians have pushed them too far, and now it's to the point where they're like, okay, well, I guess you really want to do this. The statements made by Russian officials yesterday make it very clear the goals of the SMO have not changed. There's demilitarization, denazification, security for the republics, recognition of the rights of self-determination for the peoples of Ukraine who choose to be their own country or choose to be part of Russia. So from that perspective, it has not changed, and that only reiterates the goals, which are the territories who have chosen to become part of Russia are going to remain part of Russia. Any other territories that want to become part of Russia are going to be free to decide whether or not to become part of Russia. Speaking specifically of Kharkov, Nikolaev, and Odessa. And I mean, in terms of Ukraine existing, I think it'll exist. It'll be a agrarian debt pit, for lack of a better term, perpetually needing bailouts. It'll make Greece's economic troubles in the 2000s look like a trip to Disneyland. I think it'll exist. I think eventually everything in Ukraine up to the Dnieper will become part of Russia. And I think Russia is perfectly fine with leaving the rest of Ukraine to do whatever the hell it wants. It's going to be demilitarized. Maybe they'll let it become part of EU and NATO. Maybe they will insist on neutrality. But I'm pretty sure it'll exist. They'll probably move the capital to Lvov or something, or hell, maybe it'll become part of Poland. At this point, I don't think Russia really cares what happens to Western Ukraine. I think they're just concerned with the Russian-speaking majority areas, which is pretty much the east, Nikolaev, Odessa, and beyond that, I don't think they care about what happens to the Western Ukraine. I don't think they want to occupy it. I don't think they want to deal with it.
I I don't I don't know if the Russians are going to want to give Poland, who is the most militaristic and ambitious country, who obviously has some deep-seated Russophobia, to gain millions of people from the western part of the country, even if it's in the short term a toll on the Polish economy. I don't think expanding Poland is necessarily in the interests of the Russian Federation, but who knows? If it means that the SMO wraps up quicker for Russia and they can get back to a sense of normalcy and the issue is solved, because Russia and Poland would have a hard time going into a conflict considering Poland's allegiances.
Let's just be clear here about Poland. They will never be a threat to Russia, ever.
I
And
think I think I think that they can be
they can be a thorn.
yeah, and not I don't mean a threat militarily per se, but you just don't want for Russia, the best thing that would happen is a completely, you know, destroyed Europe, and not physically destroyed, but economically. Because if you have no large sphere of influences in Europe, Russia will control all of West or Eastern Europe. They will provide cheap energy, food, and Eastern Europe will come to Russia for that, because there's no alternative in the EU, and America's not going to solely support that. So
I think the reason Russia doesn't really care about Poland is because Poland, as part of NATO, they are constrained by certain rules that the US sets. And among those rules are going to be, you do not directly attack Russia. because even the US, for all the bluster, the US understands that war with Russia means the end of the world for everybody. So they hold their proxies on a bit of a leash, and I think Russia's generally fine with that.
But
It's
they're going to try to rebuild the Polish Empire, the Lithuanian, Ukrainian, Polish Commonwealth nonsense.
oh, they're more than free to try, but
I mean, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. So if that happens, then Russia is going to be dealing with a new sphere of influence in Europe, and they can prevent
well,
that by
I
not
think there are some
allowing.
countries in Eastern Europe who are part of NATO as well who will not uh, go along with that.
I
I mean,
mean, very possible. It's
I
all
think even the U.S. will be oh, hold on there, little buddy.
it's all just hypotheticals, right? We don't know, but it is going to be interesting to see how it ends. Alex, did you have anything to add to this?
I don't think Ukraine will exist at all.
Yeah.
We built Kiev, we built Zhytomyr, we built Kharkov, we built Poltava. We'll have all of that. The Polish can have their 4 western regions. But Scott, not only is there an economic effect of these regions, there's also a societal one. You end up with 2 groups of people, both of whom kind of want to rule. Half of them despise the other half to a obscene degree. Half of them worship the people that slaughtered the other half. So I think we'd see some rather really quite interesting things out of Poland, because obviously these 4 new regions would have to have representation, so they'd have to be in parliament, etc., etc., etc. And we'd be watching this absolute bloodbath in the Polish, whatever they call it, same parliament, regardless. Yeah, I think that's how Ukraine went. Also, Romania and Hungary both get a bit, but yeah, we'll have the rest. I
Yeah, we'll
don't, I
finally
don't
get
think
rid of the
there's.
remnants of breath. What was it? Molotov Ribbentrop that everyone complains about.
Yeah, true. Yeah, actually, Poland can shut up about reparations. They got their territory back.
Poland could shut up about reparations.
I,
Um,
I just keep telling them, Ukraine is free to give that land back whenever they feel like it. None of that land is Russian.
um, I just wanted to move away from Ukraine. This still is kind of related to Ukraine, I guess, but uh, Germany has just officially entered into a recession, which I think is an important thing to note. One of the strongest economies in Europe is now in a recession. So uh, I was talking about France being the canary in the coal mine for this. They were already moving to strengthen ties with China, against US wishes in terms of their trade relations. And now Germany has fallen into a recession. Britain is probably also most definitely in a recession, if not complete stagnation. They're sitting at like 20% inflation on most household goods, which is just absolutely bonkers for that little island nation to be going through that. The people there are definitely suffering because of their government's decisions. And the US is looking like it's not going to extend its debt ceiling. Uh, Biden is not in communication with McCarthy at all, and the Republicans, and it is looking like the debt ceiling is not going to be heightened, which I think is a good thing because heightening the debt ceiling doesn't really do anything. But KSB, Alex, I'll let you talk on Europe. I don't know if you know as much about U.S. domestic economics, but me and KSB may be able to talk about that. But focusing on Europe, what do you think about the Germany recession announcement?
I mean, Europe, there's a term in Russian prison culture called taking a ball with you. It's when you escape from prison with a friend, but you take him along, knowing that you'll eat him most of the way down so that you have enough food to make it to civilization. Well, Europe is America's bore. So while America attempts to grapple with its own societal collapse, it will slowly munch on Europe and take everything there is to take, all the industry, all the scientists, everything, and leave it just a barren feudal society. I think at this point, I honestly don't know what could save Europe, Russia, but Europe is quite content, nosediving into concrete.
Yeah, they've been doing it for a while now, even before the SMO. They're going voting Green Party was pretty much the end of the German economy. Ukraine just exacerbated that already lingering issue. Greece and Italy, I mean, as soon as the stronger European countries start to suffer, the weaker ones are going to absolutely collapse. I think you're going to see issues in Spain, in Italy, in Greece, in some of the Eastern European countries. I just I think this is going to be it for Europe as having any sphere of influence outside of their direct neighbors.
Well, I
I think
mean,
it's going to be.
let's look at Europe for a second, though. How did Europe get so rich and powerful? Colonies,
Yep.
Italy, Germany, England, Spain. They all got as rich as they were by feasting off of these countries in the global these colonies they had in the global south and in Asia. They can't do that anymore, and they've had to start trying to find some way to create wealth on their own. And unfortunately, there's just not a lot of that in Europe.
Yeah. The like I said, the only country that had any real industry base was Germany. And with their decision to go green, they're removing, their nuclear power plants, which explained to me how burning coal is more green than a nuclear power plant. But they removed their nuclear power plants, so they reduced their energy independence. And then Ukraine happens, and their industry completely collapses because, you know, oil prices and fuel prices are too high. So Germany's in a recession. That's a problem. But KSB, what is your opinion on the current debt ceiling talks that are going on?
Well, it's just a mess. Let's be clear here. Raising the debt ceiling just basically gives the government the authority to print more money, to borrow more money. Um, that makes the dollar worth less, since the more of it that's in circulation, the less value the rest of it has. We could be heading towards a very interesting constitutional kind of a constitutional crisis, at least a very lengthy constitutional legal battle, because there's talk that the president can invoke the 14th Amendment to basically raise the debt ceiling on his own, which I'm not sure how strong of a legal argument that's going to have. I'm not a constitutional lawyer. I don't. I I've read the Constitution, but I'm not going to say I'm an expert on it, certainly. But just my basic understanding of it is that Congress controls the budget of the country, not the president. So, I mean, for certain, that would go to the Supreme Court. It would probably be a months, if not years long legal battle, which could become moot because if Trump or DeSantis wins, a whole new round of negotiations begin with whoever is in charge of Congress. I mean, if it's a Republican controlled Congress, then certainly they would make a deal with Trump or DeSantis. And it's a mess. I can't say how it's going to end. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's like a last, like if we get to the last 24 hours before the deadline and all of a sudden they magically make a deal. That wouldn't shock me at all. In fact, I kind of feel like that's what's going to happen is they'll make a like literally last second deal to raise it, or at least temporarily raise it a little bit. So I think that's probably what's going to happen. But it's a mess, and
It
it just shows how dysfunctional we are.
it really does. I think that's the biggest thing. When no matter what happens, whether the ceiling is extended or not, neither side is communicating. There is so much turmoil in US domestic politics that you don't see in even like the European countries who are struggling more than the United States. They're at least all, gung ho on going down on the ship together. The United States is half in, half out, can't agree on anything. There's no bipartisan agreements happening. It's it's very tense. I think that this election cycle is going to do further damage to any bipartisan agreements going on, and it's just I think the U.S. is going to be in for a rough couple of years over the next election cycle.
Well,
Uh,
Scott, you're wrong. There is something that there is bipartisan consensus
here we
on:
go. Let's hear it.
giving more money to Ukraine.
Oh, that is a bipartisan agreement, I guess, for sure. Everybody seems to want to throw their money in the fucking garbage can, but yeah, that's our tax dollars, so not too happy about that. I think we're gonna wrap it up there. It's been about an hour. I appreciate you guys coming on. These are the bro chats. These are fun to do. Much more relaxed. But Alex, thank you. KSB, thank you. Hopefully we can have you on again in the future. Go follow KSB on Twitter. Alex is a hermit, so you can't follow him anywhere, but just come on here and listen to his soothing voice with us. Puts us right to sleep. So appreciate y'all. If you could go like and subscribe, it helps me tremendously. It's the easiest way you can support me, and join us next time. I'll be posting a lot more podcasts. I am officially on summer vacation, so I am done. I'm going to be doing I'm going to try to do 3 or 4 a week minimum. So look forward to those, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye.